What happens when the vows in sickness and in health are drowned out by the clinking of champagne glasses for Anya Petrova, 8 months pregnant and wife to a titan of industry? The answer came in the terrifying silence of an unanswered phone. While she fought for her life and the life of her unborn child in a cold hospital bed, her husband, Sebastian Davenport, was sealing a different kind of deal, intertwined with his beautiful, ambitious mistress. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of chilling neglect of a powerful family that values its legacy above all else, and of a woman who had to lose everything to find the strength to fight back. Stay with us as we unravel the shocking truth. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit on wealth. Perched 70 floors above Manhattan, the floor-to-ceiling windows framed a sprawling, indifferent city. Every surface gleamed Italian marble floors, abstract sculptures that cost more than a suburban house, and vast, empty spaces that echoed with a profound loneliness. This was Anya Petrova's world, or rather, the world she had married into. At 28, with a belly swollen to a beautiful taut sphere, Anya should have been radiant. She wore a cashmere lounge set that probably cost $1,000, but she felt as cheap as a knockoff handbag. Her own reflection in the polished black granite of the kitchen island seemed foreign, a woman with everything and nothing at all. Her husband, Sebastian Davenport, was a force of nature, heir to the Davenport global empire, a multi-generational conglomerate dealing in logistics tech and private equity. He moved through the world with an unshakable, infuriating confidence. When he was in the room, he was the sun, and everyone else was just a planet caught in his orbit. Lately, however, his orbit had shifted, pulling him further and further away. "It's the Hong Kong merger, darling," he'd say, kissing her forehead with a dismissive air. "Grueling hours. You understand?" She did, or she tried to. She understood billion-dollar deals and the pressures they entailed. What she didn't understand were the late-night texts that made him smile privately, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, lingering on his suit jackets, or the way his eyes would glaze over when she spoke about the baby. He'd pat her belly, a perfunctory gesture, and say, "That's great, Anya. Just make sure the nursery is done by the time it arrives." The best, of course. Only the best for a Davenport heir. It wasn't a baby to him. It was an heir, a succession plan, another asset to be managed. Today, the loneliness was a physical weight. Sebastian was supposedly in a series of critical off-site meetings across town. He'd been gone since dawn. For the past hour, a dull ache had been building in Anya's lower back, coiling around to her abdomen in tight, unsettling waves. She'd dismissed it as Braxton Hicks, the practice contractions her obstetrician had described. But this felt different, sharper, more insistent. She tried calling him. The first time it went straight to voicemail. His phone must be off. He's in a meeting. She waited 20 minutes, breathing through another clenching cramp that stole her breath. She called again. Voicemail. A knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. She sent a text, "Sebastian, something feels wrong. The baby, please call me." The 3 little dots indicating he was typing appeared, then vanished. No reply. It was a digital slap in the face, a confirmation that he had seen her message and chosen to ignore it. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the granite island, her knuckles white. Another pain, fiercer this time, shot through her. It was a searing, white-hot agony that made her gasp. She looked down and saw a small, dark patch spreading on the light grey cashmere of her trousers. Blood. Panic cold An absolute seized her. The baby, her son, her hands trembled as she fumbled with her phone, her vision blurring. She bypassed Sebastian's number. It was pointless. She dialed her brother Dimitri. He was an artist, the antithesis of the Davenport world, living in a chaotic but warm loft in Brooklyn. He answered on the first ring. "Anya, you okay? You sound—" "Dimitri." She sobbed the word, catching in her throat. "Something's wrong. I'm bleeding. I can't reach Sebastian." The calm, grounding voice of her brother cut through the panic. "Okay, Anya, stay calm. I'm calling an ambulance to your address right now. I'm on my way. Don't move. Just breathe. I'm coming." As she slid to the cold marble floor, her phone still clutched in her hand, she tried Sebastian one last time. A desperate, foolish hope flickered within her. Maybe he hadn't seen the text. Maybe his phone had died. The call connected. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, a woman answered. A voice smooth as silk and laced with annoyance came through the speaker. "Sebastian Davenport's phone. He's a little busy right now." Anya's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. It was Penelope Vance, Sebastian's new protégé, a ruthlessly ambitious VP from the company's strategy division. Anya had met her once at a company gala. She was stunning sharp and had looked at Anya not with deference, but with a flicker of triumphant pity. "This is his wife." Anya whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's an emergency. I need to speak to him." There was a muffled sound, a rustle of fabric, and then Penelope's voice, colder this time. "He can't come to the phone. I'll let him know you called." Click. The line went dead. The silence that followed was more devastating than any shouted insult. He wasn't in a meeting. He was with her. And in the face of a life-or-death emergency, they had hung up on her. As the paramedics burst through the door, finding her in a pool of her own fear and blood on the floor of her gilded cage, Anya Petrova finally understood. She wasn't just alone. She was being actively, cruelly discarded. The sterile white of the hospital room at Lenox Hill was a stark contrast to her opulent penthouse, yet somehow it felt safer. The rhythmic beeping of the fetal heart monitor was a fragile, precious lifeline. Each beat was a reassurance that her son was still fighting a tiny warrior in a battle he didn't know he was in. Anya had been diagnosed with a partial placental abruption. Dr. Reynolds, a woman with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor, had explained it in grave tones. The placenta was detaching from the uterine wall prematurely. It was serious. It put both Anya and the baby at extreme risk. They had managed to stop the bleeding for now, but she was on strict, mandatory bed rest. The goal was to keep the baby in for as long as humanly possible. Every day counted. Dimitri hadn't left her side. He'd dealt with the hospital admission, his face a thunderous mask of rage directed at her absent husband. He held her hand, brought her water, and fielded calls from her frantic parents back in Chicago. He was her rock, the only solid thing in a world that had turned to quicksand. "Did you try him again?" Dimitri asked, his voice low and tight. Anya shook her head, staring at the phone on her bedside table as if it were a venomous snake. She answered, "Penelope Vance." She hung up on me. Dimitri's jaw clenched so hard, a muscle jumped. "That son of a bitch." He stood up, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. "I'm going to find him. I'm going to drag him here from whatever gutter he's crawled into." "No," Anya said, her voice surprisingly firm. "Don't. If he wanted to be here, he would be. Begging won't change that." The fight had drained from her, replaced by a chilling clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. His choice. Hours bled into a day. Nurses came and went, checking her vitals, adjusting her IV drip. Each one offered a sympathetic smile that Anya knew was mixed with pity. The wife of Sebastian Davenport, alone in a crisis. The gossip would be spreading through the hospital staff like wildfire. Late in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Against her better judgment, she opened it. A friend had tagged her in a post. It wasn't a post meant for her, but a photo from a popular New York society blogger. The picture was sharp, professionally taken. It showed a group of people laughing on a sun-drenched rooftop terrace somewhere in Soho. In the center of the frame stood Sebastian. He was beaming, his arm wrapped possessively around Penelope Vance's waist. She was wearing a chic, form-fitting white dress, her head thrown back in laughter, her hand resting casually, intimately on his chest. The caption read, "Titans of industry celebrate Sebastian Davenport and the brilliant Penelope Vance toast their newly secured partnership with Vanguard Tech, $1 billion deal and $1 billion view. Power couple, NYC. Success." The photo was time-stamped 2 hours ago. While Anya was being rushed to the hospital, while doctors were fighting to save their son, he was celebrating, posing for pictures, being a hashtag power couple with another woman. A dry, ragged sob escaped Anya's lips. It was proof, irrefutable, public, humiliating proof. She showed the phone to Dimitri. The color drained from his face, replaced by a deep, dangerous red. He said nothing, simply taking the phone from her trembling hands and placing it face down. Just before evening, Sebastian finally appeared. He strode into the room, not with the panic of a worried husband, but with the irritation of a busy man whose schedule had been inconvenienced. He was still in the same expensive suit from the photo, though his tie was loosened. "Anya," he said, his tone clipped. "What's all this drama? My mother called," said she heard from Dimitri. "You were in the hospital. I had to leave a crucial dinner." He didn't look at the monitors. He didn't ask about the baby. He didn't even seem to notice the pallor of her skin or the tear tracks on her cheeks. Anya simply stared at him, the picture from the blog burning in her mind. "Drama," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I was bleeding, Sebastian. They said I could have lost him. I could have. We could have." "Yes, well, you're fine now, aren't you?" he said, glancing around the room with distaste. "The doctors have it handled. That's what we pay them for." He finally looked at her, his eyes cold and assessing. "Penelope told me you called. You sounded hysterical. You can't be doing that, Anya. We have a brand to protect. A pregnant, hysterical wife doesn't play well." The sheer audacity of it, the colossal narcissistic cruelty, left her speechless. He was scolding her. He was managing his public relations crisis while she was living a real one. "I saw the picture," she said, her voice flat, "of you and her, the power couple." For the first time, a flicker of something, annoyance, not guilt, crossed his face. "That was a business celebration, Anya. Penelope was instrumental in the Vanguard deal. You're pregnant and emotional. You're blowing this completely out of proportion." He was gaslighting her, standing there lying to her face, while the beep of their unborn son's heart monitor filled the silence between them. Dimitri stepped forward, placing himself between Sebastian and Anya's bed. "Get out," he said, his voice a low growl. Sebastian scoffed. "Excuse me, this is my wife, my child. You forfeited the right to call them that when you let your mistress hang up on her while she was hemorrhaging." Dimitri shot back, his fists clenched. "You have 5 seconds to walk out of this room before I throw you out." Sebastian looked from Dimitri's furious face to Anya's broken one. There was no remorse in his eyes, only calculation. He straightened his suit jacket. "Fine," he said with a sigh, as if dealing with unruly children. "Call my assistant when you're discharged. And Anya," he added, pausing at the door, "try to get some rest. Stress is bad for the situation." And then he was gone. The scent of his expensive cologne and Penelope's perfume lingered in the air, a toxic miasma. Anya stared at the empty doorway, the beeping of the monitor sounding louder than ever. The humiliation was a physical pain, worse than any contraction. He hadn't just ignored her, he had judged her, condemned her, and dismissed her, all in the span of 5 minutes. The battle for her son's life was still raging, but another war had just been declared. The days that followed were a blur of sterile routines and quiet terror. Anya's world shrank to the size of her hospital bed. Every twinge, every flutter in her womb sent a fresh spike of anxiety through her. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The bleeding had stopped, her blood pressure was stabilizing, and the baby's heartbeat remained steady, if monitored constantly. They were in a holding pattern, a fragile truce with biology. Dmitri was a constant solid presence. He smuggled in real food, curated movie marathons on his laptop, and acted as a fierce gatekeeper, shielding her from the outside world. He was handling the logistics, the small things that felt monumental, like ensuring her plants were watered and her mail was collected from the vast, empty penthouse. It was during one of these mail runs that he found the bombshell. He returned to the hospital one evening, his face grim, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a bill or junk mail. The return address was that of a private investigative firm. It was addressed to Mrs. Genevieve Davenport. "This was in your husband's office," Dmitri said, his voice low. It was tucked inside a book on his desk. "I think you need to see it." Anya's hands trembled as she took it. Genevieve Davenport, Sebastian's mother, was the true power behind the Davenport throne. A woman forged from steel and old money, she saw the world not in terms of people, but assets and liabilities. She had always treated Anya with a cloying, condescending sweetness that never quite masked the glint of disdain in her eyes. Anya was not from the right family, didn't have the right pedigree. She was merely the beautiful, acceptable vessel for the next Davenport heir. With a sense of dread, Anya broke the seal. Inside was not a letter, but a dossier. Page after page of glossy high-resolution photographs, Sebastian and Penelope, kissing in a secluded corner of a gala, leaving a boutique hotel in the Hamptons hand in hand, laughing over a candlelit dinner at a restaurant so exclusive Anya had never even heard of it. Their affair wasn't a recent fling. The dates on the photos went back over a year long before Anya was even pregnant. But the most sickening part was the final page, a summary report. It detailed Penelope Vance's background, her career trajectory, her personal life. It was a full vetting. And at the bottom of the page, a handwritten note in Genevieve's elegant, sharp script: acceptable, smart, ambitious, from a good family, a much better long-term fit. Monitor the situation with AP. The pregnancy is the only complication. The heir must be secured first. AP Anya Petrova. She wasn't a person, she was a complication. A problem to be managed until the asset was delivered. A wave of nausea so profound it felt like drowning washed over her. It wasn't just Sebastian betraying her, it was a conspiracy. A cold, calculated family plot, where she was a pawn in a game she never even knew she was playing. Genevieve knew. She knew all along. She had investigated her son's mistress and approved of her. The illusion of her life didn't just crack, it exploded into a million pieces. The condescending smiles, the little passive-aggressive comments about Anya's family, the insistence on their own family doctors and lawyers, it all snapped into focus. They weren't gestures of care, they were measures of control. She knew. Anya whispered the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. His mother knew everything. She endorsed it. Dimitri's face was a mask of cold fury. He gently took the photos from her, his touch a stark contrast to the violence in his eyes. They're monsters, Anya, all of them. The knowledge festered inside her, a poison more potent than any medication in her IV drip. The betrayal was so deep, so multi-layered, it was almost unfathomable. Sebastian wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a puppet, dancing to the strings pulled by his formidable mother. Their marriage, their future, her pregnancy, it was all a sham, a business transaction orchestrated by Genevieve Davenport. The confrontation she'd had with Sebastian felt childish now, naive. She had accused him of an affair when the reality was so much more sinister. He wasn't hiding Penelope. His family was grooming her. That evening, as if summoned by the dark revelation, Genevieve Davenport swept into the hospital room. She was impeccably dressed, in a Chanel tweed suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, a cloud of expensive, suffocating perfume preceding her. She carried a ridiculously large bouquet of white lilies, the funeral flower, a Freudian slip of magnificent proportions. "Anya, my dear," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. She completely ignored Dimitri as if he were a piece of furniture. "We were all so worried. Sebastian is beside himself, you know. He feels just dreadful." Anya looked at this woman, at the perfectly applied makeup, the cold, assessing eyes, and felt an icy rage solidify in her veins. The grief was gone, replaced by something harder, something sharper. "Were you worried when you were reading the private investigator's report on your son's mistress?" Anya asked, her voice quiet and deadly. Genevieve's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. It was the only sign she was rattled. "I don't know what you're talking about, dear. You're clearly not well. The stress, the medication, the report you commissioned." Anya continued, cutting her off. "The one where you called Penelope Vance an acceptable long-term fit. The one where you called me a complication." Dimitri, who had been standing silently in the corner, took a deliberate step forward. The air in the room crackled with tension. Genevieve placed the lilies on the bedside table with a soft thud. The mask of concern finally dropped, replaced by an expression of weary impatience. "So you found that," she said, with a sigh, as if Anya had discovered a hidden Christmas present early. "I suppose that simplifies things. It's better to be direct, isn't it?" She looked at Anya, not as a daughter-in-law, but as a business rival across a boardroom table. "Sebastian is a Davenport. He has certain needs and responsibilities. Penelope understands his world. She is an asset to him, to the family. You, my dear, have always been romantically inclined. It was a mismatch from the start." "I am carrying your grandchild," Anya said, her voice trembling with rage. "Precisely." Genevieve snapped back, her voice like chipping ice. "And that is your value. You are carrying the Davenport heir. That is the single most important thing you will ever do. And for that, you will be rewarded." The sheer, unadulterated evil of her words hung in the air. Anya felt the fight drain out of her, replaced by a hollow, ringing shock. This woman was laying out the terms of her surrender while she was still tethered to a fetal heart monitor. The shadow of the Davenport matriarch wasn't just long, it was an all-consuming darkness that had orchestrated her entire life for the past 2 years. And now it was threatening to swallow her whole. Genevieve Davenport settled into the visitor's chair as if it were a throne. She crossed her legs, the picture of refined power, and looked Anya straight in the eye. The pretense was over. This was not a hospital visit. It was a negotiation. "Let's be practical, Anya," she began, her tone crisp and devoid of emotion. "You are clearly not in a position to be raising a child alone. You have no career to speak of, and your family, well, they are not of our world. They cannot provide for you or the child in the manner to which a Davenport is accustomed." Dmitri took another step forward. "You have no right." Genevieve held up a perfectly manicured hand, silencing him without even a glance in his direction. "This is a family matter. Please." Her dismissal was absolute. She turned her cold eyes back to Anya. "Here is the arrangement. You will carry this baby to term. You will fulfill your duty. After the birth, you will continue to live in the penthouse. You will be given a generous multi-million-dollar allowance deposited quarterly into a private account. All your needs will be met. The child will be raised as a Davenport with all the privileges that entails. You will want for nothing materially." Anya stared at her, her mind struggling to process the monstrous proposal. "And Sebastian?" "Sebastian will be discreet," Genevieve said, with a wave of her hand. "He will perform his public duties as a husband and father. He will appear at birthdays, holidays, school events. What he does in his private time with whom he associates will be his own affair, and yours. As long as you are both discreet and maintain the family's image, his friendship with Ms. Vance can continue without impacting you." It was an offer of a gilded cage for life. A contract to be a paid live-in mother and a stage-managed wife, while her husband openly continued his relationship with another woman, a relationship sanctioned and approved by his own mother. She would be a ghost in her own home, a silent partner in her own humiliation. "You want me to accept this?" Anya's voice was a choked whisper. "You want me to raise my son in a lie, to look the other way, while his father builds a life with someone else?" "I want you to be smart," Genevieve corrected her, leaning forward slightly. "This is the best possible outcome for you and for the child. Do not let foolish pride or romantic notions cloud your judgment. This is not a romance novel, Anya. This is about legacy power and securing the next generation. Your role is simple, and the compensation is more than fair." The calm, transactional way she spoke about Anya's life, her marriage, her child, was more violent than any physical blow. To Genevieve, this was just business. Anya's heart, her dignity, her love, they were irrelevant variables in a complex equation of wealth and power. Anya looked from Genevieve's implacable face to the steady beep of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of her son's life. A life they wanted to own, to script, to control. A fire ignited in the pit of her stomach. It was the primal protective instinct of a mother, a force more powerful than any Davenport fortune. It burned away the shock and the fear, leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding steel. She met her mother-in-law's gaze. No, the word was quiet, but it landed in the silent room with the force of a grenade. Genevieve blinked, genuinely surprised, for the first time. "I beg your pardon?" "No." Anya repeated, her voice stronger now, imbued with a newfound strength. "I will not sell my son's life for your allowance. I will not raise him in a house full of lies and disrespect. He will not be another asset in your portfolio, and I will not be your collateral." She took a deep breath, the sterile hospital air feeling cleaner, purer. "My son deserves a father who loves him, not one who performs his duties. He deserves a mother who respects herself, not one who accepts being paid for her silence. Your bargain, your arrangement. You can take it and you can leave. A mask of fury slid over Genevieve's features. Her perfectly constructed composure finally cracked. You foolish, ungrateful little girl, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Do you think you can fight us? We will crush you. You will walk away with nothing. I will personally see to it that you are buried in legal fees and that you never see a single penny of Davenport money. Get out, Dmitri said, his voice now shaking with contained rage. He moved to stand directly beside Anya's bed, a human shield. I said get out of her room, now. Genevieve stood up, her face a thunderous portrait of thwarted power. She looked from Anya's defiant expression to Dmitri's protective stance. She smoothed down her Chanel suit, a gesture of regaining control. You've made a grave mistake, Anya, she said, her voice dropping back to an icy calm. You will regret this. This family protects itself, and we always win. She turned on her heel and swept out of the room, leaving the funereal lilies behind as a warning. The heavy scent filled the room, cloying and oppressive. Anya sank back against the pillows, her body trembling with adrenaline. She had done it. She had stood up to the dragon. But the victory felt terrifying. Genevieve's threat hung in the air, a promise of a war to come. A war she was in no condition to fight. Dmitri gently took her hand. It was cold as ice. Anya, he said, his voice thick with pride and concern. You were incredible. You hear me? Incredible. Anya looked at her brother, tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of fear and a strange, fierce resolve. What have I done, Dima? She whispered, using his childhood nickname. You chose yourself, he said softly. You chose your son. You drew the battle line. Now we fight. She looked at the beeping monitor. Beep, beep, beep. It was no longer a sound of anxiety. It was a drumbeat, a call to arms for a war she had never wanted but would now fight with everything she had. The fragile truce with Anya's body ended 2 days after Genevieve's visit. It began with a headache, a dull, persistent throb behind her eyes that medication couldn't touch. Then her vision started to blur at the edges, shimmering, as if she were looking at the world through a summer haze. When the nurse took her blood pressure, the calm, professional facade of the hospital staff finally broke. The numbers were dangerously high. Dr. Reynolds was summoned immediately. Her kind face was now etched with deep concern. Anya, you've developed severe preeclampsia, she explained, her voice urgent but steady. Your blood pressure is skyrocketing, and it's putting immense strain on your organs, your liver, your kidneys, and the baby. The placenta isn't functioning properly. We're getting distress signals from the fetal monitor. The steady beeping had become erratic, a frantic, faltering rhythm that mirrored the frantic beating of Anya's own heart. What does this mean? Anya asked, her voice small. Dmitri stood by her side, his hand gripping her shoulder, his knuckles white. It means we can't wait any longer, Dr. Reynolds said, her gaze unwavering. The risks of keeping the baby in now outweigh the benefits of waiting. We need to deliver today. We need to do an emergency C-section. The words hit Anya with the force of a physical blow. 32 weeks. He was so small, so premature. Her carefully constructed wall of resolve crumbled, and raw, primal fear flooded in. Is he going to be okay? She sobbed, clutching her belly. He's too little. He will have the best neonatal team in the city waiting for him, the doctor reassured her, He has a strong heartbeat and he's a fighter. But we have to act now, Anya, for both of you." A flurry of activity erupted. Nurses bustled in with forms to sign a whirlwind of medical jargon and consent waivers, anesthesiology, blood transfusions, risks to the mother, risks to the infant. It was a nightmare of paperwork. As a nurse prepped her arm for another IV line, Anya made one last, desperate attempt. She asked Dmitri to call Sebastian. Not for comfort, not for support, but out of a raw biological need for the father of her child to know that his son's life was on the line. Right now. Dmitri stepped out into the hallway. Anya could hear his muffled voice tight with anger. He came back a minute later, his face pale with fury. His assistant answered. Dmitri said, his voice barely controlled, said he was in a media-sensitive planning session for the Vanguard launch party and couldn't be disturbed under any circumstances. She said she'd pass along the message when appropriate. When appropriate. The words were so corporate, so sterile, so utterly inhuman. Their son was about to be born in a medical crisis, and his father was in a meeting about a party celebrating the deal he'd made with his mistress. That was it. The last flicker of hope, the final vestigial cord connecting her to the man she had married, was severed. He wasn't just absent, he was willfully, completely, and utterly gone. A strange calm descended over Anya. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her stomach, but it was overlaid with a diamond-hard clarity. She was on her own. She was all her son had. As they wheeled her gurney towards the operating room, a nurse handed her one final form. It was a directive, a horrible choice in the unlikely event that things went catastrophically wrong. If the doctors could only save one of them, who should they prioritize? The mother or the baby? Anya looked at Dmitri, her eyes swimming with tears. He just shook his head, unable to speak. Without a moment's hesitation, Anya took the pen. Her hand was shaking, but her signature was firm. She ticked the box for the baby. "Save my son," she whispered to the nurse, her voice cracking. "No matter what, you save my son." The operating room was a cold, bright alien world. The ceiling was a galaxy of sterile lights. Anesthesiologists spoke to her in calming, detached voices. A blue curtain was erected, separating her from the reality of the surgery. Dmitri, gowned and masked, was allowed to sit by her head. He held her hand, his presence the only anchor in a terrifying sea. She felt a strange tugging sensation, a pressure without pain. She heard the disembodied voices of the surgical team, calm and focused. "Scalpel, suction, there's the bleed, BP is dropping." Her world began to fade at the edges, the drugs pulling her into a soft, welcoming darkness. Her last conscious thought was not of Sebastian, not of Genevieve, not of the betrayal. It was a prayer, a silent scream, into the void live. "Please, just live." Then, through the fog, she heard a sound, a tiny, gasping cry. It was weak, more of a kitten's mewl than a robust wail, but it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "You have a son, Anya," she heard Dmitri say, his voice thick with emotion. A nurse brought a tiny, swaddled bundle over to her for a fleeting second. He was so small, his skin red and translucent, his face a furious wrinkled knot. His eyes were squeezed shut, but he was breathing. He was real. He was alive. She managed to lift a weak hand and touch his cheek before the neonatal team whisked him away, a flurry of urgent activity as they rushed him to the NICU. "He's beautiful," she whispered to Dmitri, tears of relief and exhaustion streaming down her face. "He's a fighter," Dmitri replied, squeezing her hand, "just like his mother." As the darkness finally claimed her, Anya knew she had won the most important battle of her life. She had brought her son into the world. The war with the Davenports could wait. For now, she had her victory, a tiny, fragile boy who weighed less than 4 pounds but held the entire weight of her world. Waking up from the anesthesia was like swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. Anya's first sensation was a searing pain across her abdomen, a brutal reminder of the surgery. Her second was an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The familiar weight of her baby was gone. Dmitri was asleep in the chair beside her, his head slumped at an uncomfortable angle. She was in a private recovery room. The relentless beeping of the machines, a familiar, if unwelcome soundtrack. A nurse entered her, smile gentle. "Welcome back, Mrs. D." "Ms. Petrova," she corrected herself, a small but significant act of recognition. "Your son is stable. He's in the neonatal intensive care unit. He's on a ventilator to help his little lungs, but he's doing very well, all things considered. He's a strong boy, the NICU." The words alone were terrifying. Later that day, when she was stable enough, a nurse wheeled her down the long, quiet hallway to see him. Nothing could have prepared her for it. Her son, whom she and Dmitri had decided to name Alexander Sasha for short, was a tiny figure in a clear plastic box, a world of wires and tubes connecting him to a bank of blinking, beeping machines. He was impossibly small, his hand barely the size of her thumbnail. Seeing him like that, so fragile and so alone in his incubator, didn't break her. It forged her. Every last vestige of the timid, accommodating woman she had been was burned away in the fiery crucible of a mother's love. This tiny, fighting soul was her reason, her purpose, her entire world, and she would move heaven and earth to protect him. For 2 days, she recovered her life, revolving around the short, exhausting trips to the NICU to sit by Sasha's incubator, speaking to him, her hand resting gently on the plastic box that separated them. Sebastian never came. He never called. There was only a perfunctory bouquet of flowers delivered to the room with a generic card signed by his assistant. It was a final, damning confirmation of his abdication as a father and a husband. On the 3rd day, as Anya was watching the morning news on the hospital room's small TV, his face appeared on the screen. It was a segment on a business channel broadcasting from the lavish Vanguard Tech launch party, the one he couldn't be disturbed from. There he was, in a tailored tuxedo, a flute of champagne in his hand, and beside him, clinging to his arm, was Penelope Vance, radiant, in a shimmering emerald gown. The camera zoomed in as the host interviewed them. "Sebastian, Penelope, a truly groundbreaking partnership," the host gushed. "You two seem unstoppable. What's the secret to your success?" Sebastian smiled, his charming billion-dollar smile. "It's about vision," he said smoothly, looking not at the host, but at Penelope, "and having a partner who shares that vision completely. Someone who is as dedicated, as brilliant, and as relentless as you are." He raised his glass to her. "To Penelope, the true architect of this success." Penelope beamed, her eyes shining with adoration and triumph. "We make a great team," she said, her hand tightening on his arm. Anya watched numb. He was toasting his mistress on national television, calling her his true partner, while their son fought for his life in an incubator a few miles away. It wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a public erasure. He was writing her and their son out of his life story, replacing them with a new, more convenient narrative. That was the moment the warrior was fully born. She picked up her phone. She didn't call Dmitri. She didn't cry. Her fingers moved with calm, deliberate precision. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't needed in years from a life before Sebastian. Arthur Finch, attorney at law. Arthur was a shark, a brilliant, ruthless litigator who had helped her father's small company through a hostile takeover attempt years ago. He was sharp, discreet, and had a healthy disrespect for old money dynasties. He answered on the second ring. Anya Petrova. It's been a long time. I heard you married a Davenport. I trust you're calling to tell me you're summering in Monaco. I'm calling you from a hospital bed at Lenox Hill. Arthur, Anya said, her voice as cold and clear as ice. I just had an emergency C-section. My son is in the NICU. My husband is on television toasting his mistress. And his mother has threatened to ruin me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The jocular tone was gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a predator sensing blood in the water. Tell me everything, Arthur said. And I mean everything. For the next hour, Anya laid it all out. The neglect, the affair, Penelope answering the phone, the PI report, Genevieve's unholy bargain, Sebastian's absence during the birth, the public humiliation on television. She left nothing out. When she was finished, there was another long silence. Anya, Arthur finally said, his voice grim. This is not a divorce. This is a demolition. They've given us a gift, a nuclear bomb of negligence, endangerment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The Davenport brand is built on an image of family legacy and integrity. We are going to take a sledgehammer to it. What do we do? Anya asked. For now, you do nothing, Arthur instructed. You focus on your son. You recover. Don't speak to Sebastian or his mother. Don't answer any calls. Let them think you're broken and scared. Meanwhile, I'm going to start building our case. But we're not going to fight this in a courtroom, not at first. We're going to fight it in the court of public opinion. He explained his strategy. They wouldn't file for divorce immediately. First, they would leak. Carefully, strategically, to the right people. That afternoon, Arthur Finch made a single phone call to a seasoned Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the New York Times, known for her takedowns of powerful men. He didn't give her the whole story. He just gave her a taste, a thread to pull on. I have a source, he told the journalist. A story about the Davenport family. It involves a high-risk pregnancy, a celebration with a mistress and a newborn in the NICU. The mother is terrified to speak out. The evidence is damning. The uprising had begun. Quietly, secretly, from a hospital room overlooking the city, Anya Petrova, the discarded wife, began to sharpen her weapons. The Davenports thought they had crushed her. They had no idea they had just created their own worst enemy. The first article dropped on a Tuesday morning on the front page of the New York Times website. The headline was devastatingly simple. Davenport airborne, in crisis, as father toasts new partnership. The story was a masterpiece of journalistic precision, meticulously sourced and clinically brutal. It didn't mention Anya by name, referring to her only as his wife of 2 years. It detailed a high-risk pregnancy, a desperate call for help from a hemorrhaging wife, and an emergency C-section. It then juxtaposed this harrowing medical emergency with Sebastian's glitzy televised celebration with Penelope Vance, a senior executive at Davenport Global, quoting his gushing praise of her as his true partner. It mentioned a newborn son fighting for his life in the NICU, It didn't need to state the accusation outright. The timeline did it for them. The story exploded. By noon, hashtag Davenport and hashtag Where Was Sebastian were trending on Twitter. Business news outlets, gossip columns, and mainstream media alike picked up the story. The narrative was irresistible. A billionaire tycoon abandoning his critically ill, pregnant wife for his mistress. It was a PR cataclysm. The Davenport Global stock, a pillar of stability on the Dow Jones, wobbled, then dropped 3 points. Then 5. Investors were spooked. The brand, so carefully cultivated over generations by Genevieve, was being immolated in real time. In the hospital, Anya watched the fallout with a detached, cold calm. Arthur had forbidden her from making any comment, instructing her to maintain complete silence. Her silence was her power. It made her the mysterious wronged victim, allowing the public to fill in the blanks with their own outrage. The call came from Genevieve, not to Anya, but to Dimitri. Her voice, usually so controlled, was frayed with panic. "What is this? What have you done?" "You need to make her release a statement, a joint statement. Say it's all a misunderstanding, a malicious rumor." Dimitri's reply, as he later recounted to Anya, was short. "You wanted a war, Genevieve. Congratulations." He then hung up. The next move from the Davenports was predictable. Their high-powered PR firm released a statement decrying the vicious and unfounded attack on the family, citing a private medical matter being cruelly exploited. It was too little too late. The public wasn't buying it. Then Arthur Finch made his second move. He leaked the PI report. Anonymously, of course, a copy landed on the desk of the same journalist, along with Genevieve's handwritten note calling Anya a complication. Part 2 of the story was even more explosive. Inside the Davenport plot, Mistress vetted by matriarch, as pregnant wife was sidelined. It painted a picture not just of infidelity, but of a cold corporate-style conspiracy to manage out the current wife and install a new one. Genevieve's note was published in full. This time, the target wasn't just Sebastian, it was Genevieve. The powerful matriarch was exposed as a ruthless puppet master. The story shattered the myth of the respectable old money dynasty, revealing the rot at its core. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Penelope Vance was suspended from her position at Davenport Global, the brilliant architect, now a toxic liability. She was hounded by paparazzi, her reputation in tatters. She was a pawn who had been sacrificed the moment the game turned. The Davenport Global Board of Directors, a collection of powerful figures who cared more about share prices than family drama, called an emergency meeting. The pressure on Sebastian was immense. He was no longer a charming heir. He was a brand-destroying pariah. Finally, 2 weeks after Sasha was born, they capitulated. Arthur Finch received a call not from Genevieve's lawyers, but from the lawyers representing the Davenport Global Board. They wanted a meeting. The meeting took place in Arthur's sterile, intimidating boardroom. Anya was there, looking pale but resolute, with Arthur and Dimitri by her side. Sebastian and Genevieve sat opposite them, flanked by a team of stone-faced lawyers. Sebastian looked haggard, the charm stripped away to reveal a petulant, cornered man. Genevieve was a pillar of icy rage, her face a mask of barely suppressed fury. There was no apology. There was no remorse. It was a negotiation of surrender. Arthur Finch laid out Anya's terms. They were not a request. They were a declaration. Full and sole custody of Alexandra Petrova. The Davenport name would not be on the birth certificate. Sebastian would have no parental rights. None. The penthouse, fully paid for its title, transferred to Anya's name, a settlement amount so staggering it made the Davenport lawyers blanch. It wasn't just a divorce settlement, it was punitive damages. It was a price for their cruelty. Sebastian would be required to fund a multi-million-dollar trust for Sasha to be managed by an independent third party until he was 25. And finally, a gag order. The Davenports, Sebastian, Genevieve, all of them, would be legally forbidden from ever speaking about Anya or Alexander publicly, from ever contacting them, from ever trying to interfere in their lives again. Genevieve started to speak, her voice trembling with anger. "This is outrageous. This is extort." Arthur cut her off. "The alternative," he said calmly, sliding a file across the table, "is that we file a civil suit for endangerment, negligence, and conspiracy. And this file, containing every text message, every photo, every damning piece of evidence, goes public. Your stock is down 12%. How much more can it take before the board decides to replace your son as CEO? Before they oust your entire family from the company you built your name on?" It was checkmate. Genevieve looked at Sebastian, who refused to meet her gaze. She saw the defeat in the room, the cold calculation in the eyes of her own lawyers. She had lost. Her legacy, her control, her perfect image, all of it shattered by the ungrateful little girl she had so casually tried to discard. She gave a single sharp nod. The deal was done. Weeks later, Anya walked out of the hospital with Sasha. He was still small, but he was breathing on his own. He was a survivor. She took him home, not to the cold, echoing penthouse of her marriage, but to her home. The Davenport chapter of her life was over. She had walked through fire and emerged not burned, but forged. She had lost a husband, but found herself. She had been betrayed by a family, but had built her own, a tiny but fierce unit of 3, a mother, her son, and her loyal brother. Looking out over the Manhattan skyline from her window with Sasha sleeping peacefully in his crib, Anya Petrova felt no bitterness, only a quiet, profound strength. The Davenports had taught her a valuable lesson. A gilded cage is still a cage, and freedom, she now knew, was the only luxury worth having. Anya Petrova's story is a harrowing journey from the heights of unimaginable wealth to the depths of betrayal, and ultimately to a strength she never knew she possessed. She was dismissed, ignored, and left to face a life-threatening crisis alone. But in her darkest hour, she found her voice, her power, and her purpose. She proved that integrity is not for sale, and that a mother's love is a force more powerful than any corporate dynasty. Her story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a stark reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity and freedom. What did you think of Anya's incredible fight for justice? Could you have been as strong in her position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of survival and empowerment, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will leave you breathless. Thank you for watching.